everybody, I'm Kay Helm, and this is the Your Voice podcast. Find your voice, tell your story, change the world. Each week I interview someone about the way in which they live or tell their story, and I hope you find each episode not only inspiring but also helpful in a practical way. This week my guest is Mashona Council, and walking is more than a metaphor for her. She is literally walking out her story. Let's hear what she has to say. Hi Mashona, how you doing?
I'm well, Kay. How are you?
You want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So as you said, my name is Mashona, and thank you so much for just creating this platform and giving me an opportunity to participate. Telling our stories is super important, and so it's nice to be able to occupy this space with you. As we said, my name is Mashona. I currently live in Atlanta, Georgia, but am grew up in a small town called Gloucester, Virginia. And so currently in Atlanta, I have been there for about 15 years. I'm working in Council Consulting, which is my own business I started about 5 years ago, which gives me an opportunity to work with nonprofit organizations, schools, churches, really anyone who works on behalf of young people to come in and train their staff, build capacity. And it's wonderful to be in this space where I can do what I love, but also just of youth development leaders. So it's the work that I do.
It sounds like a work that gets you out and into kind of different environments from time to time.
It definitely does. I enjoy people. I enjoy young people especially. And so having the opportunity to get out and see the different ways in which people are meeting the needs of children and communities and families is something that is exciting to me. I worked in youth development as a direct service provider right out of college and continued doing that for about 15 to 20 years, working primarily with high school students, teenagers around the issues of character and leadership development. And so, again, as many opportunities as I can to help others just continue to do that and to build up the next generation is really important for me.
Well, thank you for that, because that is indeed important work, and it really does take that investment into those lives.
Thank you.
So recently I heard, and this is actually, I knew you from Gloucester. I didn't know you well then, but I had met you a few times before. And what caught my attention recently was that you took a very long walk.
It's true. I did some walking recently.
You want to tell us about that?
Sure. I think, interestingly enough, I give Gloucester a lot of credit just for my upbringing and who I am now today. And I think primarily because we were born in Philadelphia, and then my parents moved us to Gloucester at a very young age. But with this idea, I remember my dad telling me stories as a kid of how growing up in Philly, his parents would bring him down to Virginia, and just the idea of being able to look up at night without the city lights and to see a sky full of stars, just how that opens up the world. And so I just think that that's in our DNA, in all of it's just in our DNA to just look for opportunities to be exposed to things differently. And so the walk that I did most recently, to me, just feels like another leg of this journey of just always pursuing and looking for more and keeping my head up, to the sky to see what's revealed. And so I recently completed a 125-mile walk along what's called the Harriet Tubman Byway. And so it extends from the eastern shore of Maryland into Delaware. It actually continues on into Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, different parts of Pennsylvania. But I completed that walk. The first to do it, which was, a pretty significant accomplishment, not what I started out to do. I didn't start out with this accomplishment in mind, but was able to complete the walk over the course of 7 days. And it was a really powerful experience.
Wow, 7 days, 125 miles. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I think if I'm honest, it still is a little surreal to think about the fact that I've accomplished it. And even though I'll look through pictures and, be reminded and tell the story from time to time, it's still like, yeah, I guess that was a big deal. And I guess I did do that. I think what I know about when God calls us to do things, that it doesn't always start out as a big deal. I think if it did start as a big deal, we'd probably back away from it pretty quickly.
That's true.
And so he has this really beautiful way of just showing you just a piece of it, and you get all the way in to that piece of it, and then a bigger piece is revealed, and by that point you're already in. So it's can be easier to move on to the next step that he has for us. And so About a year ago, I started out with this idea of just walking. I had been working through some things personally and battling some depression. And so God just spoke to me around this beauty of walking, and just that no matter what is coming our way, that we have to keep walking. And it was as simple as that. He just said, I need you to walk. I need you to get up. I need you to walk with me. So I committed over the course of this year to walk every single month, a minimum of 86 miles a month, which, can seem like an arbitrary number, but it was pretty calculated. But it really was this commitment to my health, to my mental well-being, that I was just going to get up and walk. And then about March of this year, I heard about this 125-mile byway. And before that, I didn't know about the Harriet Tubman National Park that was opening up. I didn't know about, this trail. Obviously, I knew the Underground Railroad that existed, but I didn't really know it as a walking trail. And so when I found out about it in March, it just clicked. And again, it looked as if this was the next big thing or the next big step that God was preparing me for. And so he led me to do some scouting and connected me to different people who were in the community, and shared my idea with them. And I really just made an initial phone call and said, hey, I hear that there's this byway. I'd like to be able to walk it. Has anyone ever done it? And do you think it's okay if I try it? And they were like, sure. No one has ever asked us about this before, but we would love to have you do it and help you out in whatever way that we possibly can. And so what's awesome sometimes is we get these ideas, but then that's when the doubt comes in. Or is that really God saying that I should walk that far in that short amount of time by myself with no one that I know? And so although some of the doubt set in, there were so many things that God did to confirm that this was exactly what I was supposed to be doing. And so as audacious as 125 miles seems, like, it really was a beautiful experience. And, the walking was not the hardest part of it. It really is just mentally getting yourself prepared to do it and being open to whatever is going to come. And so the things that emerged that week, the experiences, the people I met, it was really amazing for God to just create that, what I feel is this personal experience for me that also then, had an impact on so many others.
That's what I picked up when I was looking at some of the news articles that came out, some of the videos that you posted, that it was an emotional experience. It seemed to mean a lot to a lot of people that you met along the way. And just, it was powerful just to see there was a photograph of you kneeling on the side of the road and you've got your head down. What was happening in that moment?
Yeah, it was powerful. So all week, literally, I started out the beginning of the week and it was just my parents and myself and these random people that I had connected with that were going to allow me a place to stay throughout the week that I was walking. And then somehow after we posted a picture, posted a video, then the energy in the community just exploded. Honestly, there's no other way to describe it. And so, I had this Facebook page at the beginning of the week, started with 12 viewers, 12 people who liked the page. By the end of the week, it was at 600 people, which again, for me, just taking this walk with God, like, where are these people coming from?
Yeah.
And so throughout the course of the week, people just began to share the story. And, because it is connected to Harriet Tubman, she is an icon and we know what she did was great. We know that her sacrifice was great. And so there were people who were able to connect to it from that different level, depending on where they were, what their life is like. Again, there was just a place and space for all of them. So there's a group that exists. It's a national organization. It's called Girl Trek. And Girl Trek's mission is around this idea of walking. And it's about the power that comes, especially when Black women walk, right? When Black women decide to take those steps to put themselves first, to think about their health first. We're always giving and helping and building up the community. But what really happens when a woman decides to walk for herself is really their mission. And so God had actually, ironically, because we know who he is, he had impressed on me to reach out to Girl Trek prior to the walk, and just to let them know, like, hey, I'm doing this thing, but I couldn't get past that. Like, it just seemed really egotistical almost for me to call them and say, hey, I'm doing this really cool thing. I think you guys could follow along. Like, that just didn't feel right for me. But again, what I know about God is that his will be done.
Yes.
And so on the second day of the walk, I get a message on Facebook, and it's a woman from the Girl Trek national team that says, sister, we hear what you're doing. We love it. We'd love to be able to connect with you. Give me a call. And so on one of my walks, I speak with her, and Girl Trek mobilizes women all over the country in different communities, and their primary goal is to support each other and to walk together. And so in that Delaware, Maryland community, there were Girl Trek women in the area. And so immediately that night, there was a group of women who came and walked about a mile with me to finish the journey. And so then the picture that you referred to was that, again, all week long, folks had followed along the story. There had been Girl Trek members who had been a part of, what I felt was our experience now. And so they all came, and they were there at the state line when I crossed over. And so I remember coming down. I'm probably 3/10 of a mile away, and I see people aligned with signs up, and I'm like I had run a marathon, and it was super exciting. And I'm walking towards the state line, and as I pass by, this guy says, "Hey, you just crossed over the state line," but it was before the "Welcome to Delaware" sign. And so there just was a spirit and a power that just overtook me in that moment. And I just collapsed and just to thank God for helping to bring me to that place. And instantly, these folks just gathered around, and many of them were the Girl Trek women who had followed along the journey. There were others who had just found out about the story through Facebook throughout the week, but wanted to be there at the end. And they literally just came and laid hands and prayed for me in that moment to build my strength back up and just to honor the walk that had happened that week. One thing that's really beautiful is that my walk did parallel with Harriet Tubman's journey. And so one of the things that we know about Harriet Tubman is when she crossed into Delaware, pretty much at that same place, she talks about the fact that she had arrived in a strange land with strangers and there was no one there to greet her. And so what felt like this really powerful moment of bringing her spirit and her legacy again into Delaware, but yet this time there were people there to greet us, to greet her and I. And at the same time, they were strangers and it was a strange land, but there was something that had bound us together throughout the course of the week. And it was really powerful. It was probably one of the most powerful moments of the experience to just show that we're not in this alone. Whatever the fight is, whatever the journey is, whatever the walk is, metaphorically, literally, that we're not in it alone. And so that moment was very special. And I'm glad that it got captured by someone's camera because, nowadays most things are. And so I'm glad to have that picture to look back to.
Yeah, and it is powerful. And it is, like you said, that is how God does. I mean, we're walking through you can take it as a metaphor for life. We believe we're walking through life by ourselves, and we reach out in whatever capacity we have to reach out. Like you said, maybe not really seeking that attention or anything, maybe not even knowing the help that we do need, just that little bit of reaching out, and we make that connection.
Yeah, it's true. I think for me, I always have, God and I, we've always been partners, I can remember when I first was introduced to him and when I first made that relationship and began to depend on him. But I think sometimes it is just about he and I, and I tell God all the time, God, if we could just walk together throughout the days, I promise you I'd be fine. I'd be good. I'd be exactly where I need to be and who I need to be. But there are these things called people along the journey. And so what was really special for me is that this did start out as a he and I, and he called me to walk, and he told me about the comfort and the healing and the freedom that would come from this walk. And it was a promise that he had made to me, and a promise that I could cash in terms of being obedient to what he called me to do. But then to see him use his people and to use what he has access to then supplement everything that he needed me to have in that week, but also in turn give them what they needed, just really spoke to how awesome God is, and, how he can take this one simple stone, he could take 5 loaves and 2 fish, and he could feed the multitude. And so it was like he took this one walk that he had called me to, but fed a multitude from it. And that was, I was honored to be used in that way.
When I was looking at your walk, and I looked at the Harriet Tubman Byway, and I wanted to refresh my own knowledge about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railway and everything. And the thing that stood out to me was a quote that came from her when she crossed into Pennsylvania. It said she recalled later, and this is the quote. It says, "When I found I had crossed that line, I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person."
Yeah.
There was such a glory over everything. The sun came like gold through the trees and over the fields, and I felt like I was in heaven.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. Like just the way in which her quotes and her words guided me throughout the week. And I think it's pretty powerful that you spoke to that one specifically, just because that was one of those guiding quotes of hers that guided the week for me, and even guided prior to the walk. Because I think for me and some of my struggles and the things that I have battled with, it's this idea that I would be different, right? Like she crossed over and she thought that, well, and it's like, no, I'm still me. God is good, right? And his glory is great. And he meets us, and he provides all that we need to do it. But we are who we are, right? And we are who God has called us to be. But it's in his glory that we are able to just feel the fullness of what he intends for us. And so those moments that we allow ourselves to have with God, and I've said, repeatedly, it doesn't have to be this dramatic 125-mile walk. It could be just those quiet times that we have with God, in which he assures us of who he is and of who we are, and just the power and the beauty that comes when those things align. Yeah, so Harriet Tubman definitely holds a special place in my heart from that week, and just the ways in which God showed me how he provided for her, and that he is the same God. He is the same God that carried her through and carried her over, and, had her have those experiences that were just for her, but he was able to use those experiences to then bring others across to freedom. And so again, very, very powerful to think that we serve the same God.
Yes. Yes, and the courage that she had to go back and forth, to keep going back to places that would not receive her well, places that were dangerous and even deadly for her to go, and to keep going back for the sake of others. That just, where does that come from? Yeah. And God sustains us not only in that physical way, but with that extra thing that we need, especially, you think of sometimes people in certain times of history being called to be that one that steps out, and often they're one of many that step out. Yeah. We kind of, as people, we fix on one or two. We love heroes, but there are often many that we've never heard of that are doing strong, courageous things. And so I think it's an important lesson for all of us, really, to understand that our stories are not little in God's sight.
Definitely. I think one of the things when people talk about, or you read about who Harriet Tubman was, I think one of the things that are pretty consistent was her relationship with God, and just understanding that she was humble enough to recognize that she was an instrument, right? She was a vessel, and she allowed herself to be used by God in that way. And this is what he used her to do. And I think when I look at her life, the fact that, yes, she did this great thing, and she went back and she sacrificed, and she did that repeatedly, but she also at age 12 put herself between an angry plantation owner and their slave, and was hit in the head with a 2-pound weight, and, cracked her skull and put her in a coma. Like, she was that same sacrificial person. And so in her character, that's who she was. She was a defender of people. She was one who was willing to put herself in the middle of, and God then used that throughout the course of her life. And so I think for us to just spend time with God and let him share with us and reveal to us who we are, and who we are at our core, that we are loving and that we are brave, and that it is his strength that allows us to do and will provide for us to do whatever he's called us to, whether it gets the limelight, whether it gets the recognition, but just acknowledging like that's who he designed us to be, to be made in his image and to love in his image. Is something that we're all very capable of, but it does take bravery, and it does take courage to love what we think the loveless, or the folks who people don't give attention to or don't want to spend time with. Like that takes courage too. And so again, just allowing ourselves to listen to God and to hear from him, to find out where he's directing us and what circle he's called us into, and what people are in our sphere of influence that he wants us to love on and to take care of.
And that's right.
So again, it's just fascinating to me who God has called us to be at our core, and then how that progresses throughout our lifetime.
It's like a thread, that runs all the way through, if we're true to that.
Definitely.
It seems like walking is a big part of your story. What does walking mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's when we talk about this idea of a thread, I do vision boards every year. I've been doing it maybe for like the past 6 or 7 years. And it really is just this time that I spend towards the end of the year, just really getting before God and just allowing him to show me, to show me what lies ahead. And again, because he knows who I am, he doesn't show me the whole picture, right? It's enough to get
Hmm.
me moving. But for every year that I look at my vision boards, I have some kind of path on it. And so I feel like God has just always spoken to me about the power of being on our path, right? The path that he intends for us, but that
Hmm.
the acknowledgement that if we're on that path, our responsibility is just to walk, right? That it requires something, walking as simple as it sounds, it does require faith. It does require courage. But that if we're able to just put one foot in front of the other, that's us doing our part. I think for a lot of my life, I've been very concerned with, okay, but if I take this step, then what happens, right? So it's like, and for a lot of life, I've been reluctant to take the next step for fear of not knowing, well, what happens at step 8 or 9? And so
Right.
God has had to show me very clearly, like, that's it. That's where your faith lies. And so I need you to take that step. And when you take the next step, and then you look up one day and you're like, oh, I've been walking for a while. I've been walking through this thing. I've been walking through this pain or through this hurt, or to get to forgiveness or to get to healing. But the only way we do that is to walk. When I said that I had committed in 2017 to do, to go out and just to walk with God every day, he began to just bring a lot of scriptures and some of the stories from the Bible just to life. And he showed me how he's been using walking for forever to get to his people. The story that talks about the man who's sitting like right there at the well, and he has the mat and he's waiting and he can't get in there because he's like, I'm waiting for someone to come and help me. And God's like, no, pick up your mat and walk, right? Like, it's just,
Yes.
there's an act that we have to do. And so we can get complicated, right? We can complicate it because that's who we are. We're complicated people. Um, and so we can make it bigger than that. And so God has really had to reduce it for me. And he's been doing that for some years now. Just, Mashona, I just need you to walk. I just need to put one foot in front of the other and trust me. Trust that I'll provide the next step after that. Trust that when you put your foot down, that it's going to be on good ground. And so I think that God has just showed me, year after year and repeatedly, just the power of walking. And that walking, as simple as it seems, it really does require something of us. It requires that we put ourselves, first, and we put ourselves in position to be, on that right path with him. But that there's a level of trust and courage that comes
Hmm.
for us to put one foot in front of the other without fear of what's longer, down the line that we don't see, but that we're able just to put one foot and trust him, trust that he knows what foot we're putting down, trust that when we put it down, it's on good ground, and then trust that he's going to show us where to put the next foot. And so what's been fascinating is that you look up after a certain amount of time and you say, okay, I've gone somewhere. I've walked through some things that I didn't think that I could. And for me personally, I feel like I've spent a lot of my life of just like, well, how am I going to figure this out? And how am I going to get through this? And so for me in this year, especially, God has just said, I need you to walk. I just need you to keep walking and showing me that there are things that will always lay on our path. Like, that's a given, right? Things will drop on our path. There are things that are on our path that we didn't put there. There are things on our path that we did put there and we didn't know that we were putting there when we made a poor decision 5 years ago or a great decision 5 years ago. And so regardless of what is on the path, our ability to keep walking and to have faith enough and courage enough to walk is what God requires of us. And so again, to have this experience walking these 125 miles where I thought I knew, I had a plan and I thought I was just going to walk. And at the end of the week, my friend was going to meet me and we were going to drive back to Atlanta. It's like, all right, God, I'm going to do that. But he added so much more, so much more on the journey that I had no idea of. But my commitment to him, my obedience to him was that I would walk. And so it's really powerful for him to have taken this experience and so much more, as he promised he would, right? He told us that he would do that above and beyond, exceedingly above anything we could ever dream or imagine. And he has done that for sure.
Yes, yes, he does. And in that walk, not necessarily just the recent walk that we've been talking about, but in general, in that walking with the Lord, what has surprised you the most?
I think what surprises me the most, and this is, I know it probably sounds silly, is just how much he loves us. Like that, it shouldn't be surprising, right? None of who he is should surprise us. I've been a believer and walking with God for a long time, but I still am surprised by just how much he loves us and how much he's concerned about every detail of our lives, and not in a judging, critical, oh, you better stop that kind of way. Because yes, I know he convicts us and he wants what's best for us. And, we know all of that is significant and important, but just how much he is concerned about the smallest of details really surprised me. I mean, there was nothing, like I said, on this walk, on the fact that I've been running my own business now for 5 years, I've been able to travel and honestly have a greater increase in money since I've been working on my own. Like, he just cares about all of it. And if we allow ourselves to just walk in what he's called us to do, then he provides. And so, yeah, I don't know why I'm still surprised by that sometimes, just surprised by how good he is. Like I said, on this walk, I had people who came out of nowhere to bring me a cold bottle of water or offer me a place to stay, or, hey, can I just walk with you for a little bit? And those things were surprising to me. Even like I said, now I will find myself, and not because I want to, I'm arrogant or I want to boast about what I was able to accomplish, but I just look at the pictures of the people that I met and I'm like, God, where did they come from? Like, why did you do that? Why was it important that I got a hug from him at this moment, or she offered to carry my bag, or, she offered to bring me water, and people just gave of themselves. And so how do I make sure that I'm doing that every single day? Because just as he used those people for me, he's using me for someone else. And so that's the beauty, right? Like, that's the beauty. It's not manna that's coming from heaven in that way, but it's this person that God uses, and God uses people. And so it just still surprises me of how awesome he is and how much we can depend on that. We can depend on him being who he is. He is the same God. And even though we change and we can be wishy-washy and doubtful, like, he is the same God who loves us, who wants what's best for us, who wants us to align ourselves with him so that we can experience this good life that he has for us. That it's a wonderful surprise. It's a wonderful surprise, but it definitely surprises me.
Yeah, it is. One of those things that we know in our minds and we experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when your heart gets to the point where you're just overflowing with it, where he is so constant and so loving and so over the top, really, and in those unexpected moments, that it is, in a way, it can be overwhelming in a very good way. For sure.
For sure. And I think the challenge, is then how do we become that, right? How are we God in the flesh, right? And so how can people begin to have that same expectation for us and of us, that no matter what, like, she's always pouring out and she's always loving on me and she's always kind. And, again, for many people in this world, like, we are the Christ that they meet. We are the only way that they get to know who God is and experience what we have. And so how do we challenge ourselves to be a surprise to someone? And, people talk about those random acts of kindness, pay for the person in the grocery store behind you. And yes, you can do those dramatic measures for sure, but you could also just smile at people. You can give them time and give them your ear when they're going through something. You can, there's so many ways in which God wants to use us daily to reach his people. And so how do we allow ourselves to be open to that? Because there are opportunities every single day to show God to people and to love on people. And so again, it's just us modeling after our Father.
Yes, and I know your passion is young people, and so let's give a homework assignment this week. What should we be doing this week to love on the young people in our lives and to change somebody's life? There's so many of the teens and youth that are struggling right now. What can I do, just as I'm not a youth worker, I'm just a person who occasionally crosses paths with some of the youth in our community, and what can I do this week?
Wow. Okay, that's awesome. It's an awesome question. I had a chance to volunteer with some teens yesterday, actually, at a service project, and one of the things that I recognized that we can all do, and it's gonna sound big, and hopefully I can break it down, is just to see them, right? Just to see the young person that you are interacting with. I think we have so many thoughts, misconceptions, perceptions about who we think they're going to be. We hear about millennials. We hear about this generation being linked to technology. We hear, that they're more disrespectful now than they've always been, and their language and all of these things. But if you allow yourself just to see that child, that teenager that you are in front of, it allows us to release some of those thoughts, right? Some of that judgment that we already have. And so we can see hurt, we can see joy, we can celebrate with them, we can lend an ear, we can give a high five, or we could say nothing, right? And we can just see them. Because sometimes it's not always in what we do, it's just in who we are. And so just to be in their space and not feel like you have to, again, go over the top to let me make sure that I'm meeting all their needs, but just be present with young people is something that matters. And not enough of us will do that. We'll take our time and just sit there. And even if they say nothing, but they're on technology, but you're still there, like that presence goes a long way. And again, we experience it with God. Like, we're not always asking him for something. Sometimes we just need him to sit with us. God, I just need to know that you're there.
Yes.
And for me, when it comes to young people, unfortunately, it's hard for many of them to express that is their need, but they can feel it. And when it's sincere, when it flows from what God has given us abundantly, then they can feel it. They can feel it when you walk into their space, when you walk into their presence. And so that's enough. And then as seeing them, one of the things that I've prayed is just, God, let me see them the way that you see them. And so in so doing, okay, God, now what do they have need of? And he'll show you. He will show you, whether it's something as simple as a hello, hey, how you doing over there? Like, it doesn't have to be grand, but It does have to be something. So that's what I would challenge folks to do, is just to see them, look at them for who they are, ask God to give us his eyes as we view them and to reveal any need that we can meet, but just give our presence when we're with them.
Yes. Yeah. And I think if we'll do that this week, we'll get to the end of the week and we can, there is a Facebook page for this podcast, and maybe we'll get into sharing some stories and see what happens this week when people begin to just see the other, whether that's a young person, anybody in particular, just thinking about them this week.
For sure.
So I appreciate your time, Mashona, and sharing part of your story with us, sharing your walk with us. It's been uplifting and I hope inspiring for folks. And I just really have enjoyed talking with you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. And even in this, which I think is powerful, just I'm re-energized as well. And I think to this podcast, like when we share our stories, like it really does change the world. And so it changes our own world, but then it changes those who get to hear it. And so even just in our conversations, like, okay, how can I be more intentional to do those things and to acknowledge them? So thank you. Again, thank you for sharing the space and the platform. Thank you. If you're enjoying the Your Voice podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, give us a review on iTunes. Until next time.